So what got me into Corollas, my family had an auto shop, which 500 plus cars in the backyard, and I was given free reign to pick whatever car I wanted. Just by looking of style points of what I thought looked cool, I ended up on a 1985 Supra. Now, family and I worked on it as a 16-year-old, thought it was the coolest thing in the world, started doing a bunch of work to it, got it running good, took it out for a drive. My dad took it out for a spin, got the car on the road, stepped on it, lit the tires up, car got sideways, came back and says, no. That's far too fast of a car for a 16-year-old. You need to pick something else. And my heart was broken. I spent so much time looking at him, investing the love of what I thought was like the coolest car ever as a 16-year-old. I needed to find something that was from 1985, was a Toyota, that looked similar, that had this great thing. Ended up finding the 1985 Toyota Corollas. Started doing a little bit of research, finding this cult following of what they were, and thought they really looked cool. Had a lot of drift following, started looking into that, and sunk my teeth into what I could afford at the time, which was a 1985 Corolla SR5. So, new driver, new driver's license, this little old Toyota shitbox that was falling apart, as most of them are. But I really loved that car. It was something super special to me, and as one of my very first cars that I paid for, it was a big deal. I loved that thing until the day that I both crashed it and then blew the head gasket on it, and it was far too much to repair and gave up on it. So I drove the living wheels off it, just doing clutch kicks to try and get it sideways, throwing the handbrake at high speed and just abusing it as a car. I tried keeping up with a couple of buddies, made a pretty grand mistake and ended up going sideways into a curb at probably 30 or 40 miles an hour. It hit hard enough to shove the wheel and strut into the body. I hopped up over the curb into the dirt and hit it pretty bad. Ended up getting it towed home, started pulling everything apart, putting it back together with what I could, and 2 weeks later, driving the car hard down the freeway, just pinned in fifth gear, trying to accelerate, the car just slowly lost power until the motor just seized. And that was the last final straw. The car was just done. Frame was bent, multiple things were bent underneath, head gaskets blown. It was time to give up and move on. I'd had multiple cars after that first one, and I really wanted to get back into that chassis again. So I saved up, and at the time, which was considered a high dollar amount, which we would love to pay now, in the 2000s, I paid about $4,500 for a true GTS with a CBY kit on it. I loved the look. I loved the way the car drove. It was just a fantastic find. Owning that car really started to get the true passion for this chassis. Driving it as a daily, driving it through the mountains, and just enjoying the car in general, I really started to get to where the point that I will always have one of these, and became a truly big passion for this vehicle. That particular example was a really nice late model. Had a beautiful clean interior, uncracked dash, which is basically unobtainium now. That car was so nice and so clean, I wanted to go faster. I wanted to race these. And it was like my decision became cut apart a beautiful, clean, nice interior car and destroy it, make a race car, or buy an empty chassis and start from the ground up. If I could go back and tell the old me, I would have been just saying, hey, cut it up. That would have been the smart thing to do. Ended up finding a $500 used shell that was a previous drift practice car owned by Ken Gushi. Seam welded chassis, the price was right, I couldn't turn it down, I had to buy it. Brought the shell home, had them together for a very short amount of time, ended up selling my blue car, going on and ready to build this into the race car that you have here today. As life goes, sometimes you have to make sacrifices, and race cars are not that important. So after the 3 years it sat in the field, I was finally able to bring it home, and you get the car fizz of seeing your race car again after sitting for so long. I had a bit of motivation at the time and slowly piecing it together, getting the engine at one point and getting the transmission at another point. But seeing them sitting together of like separate apart, it looks so far away. Like, oh, I don't have a wiring harness. I don't have brakes. I don't have an interior. I don't have a seat. I don't have a dashboard. All of these things are like, oh, it's so far away. It's going to take so much work. You don't really feel motivated to get moving. I don't know the exact point of what it took to really cross that bridge over, but I remember driving other friends' cars of like full tiered race cars. I was like, I really need to get on this. And honestly, a big portion of that was my wife pushing me. She's like, hey, you have a full on race car. Like, you're modifying your daily drivers. You're spending all this money on your other cars. Let's invest in the race car. Let's get that going. And her push was a huge, important factor in getting this thing going. She's pushed me basically along the entire thing and giving me all the motivation I need to get this thing going, both in engine swap and getting it roadworthy and getting it dialed in the way that I want it. Then came the time to decide of what engine I needed to have for a power plant. I wanted to go with a blacktop, but not smog compliant. Beams, not smog compliant. I had this dream of putting in the 1UZ, the 4-liter Lexus V8, but it is an American built engine. It's something that we can put into the chassis and I can make it smog compliant. And that was where the engine came about. Since I got into investing into looking at what this engine could do and how reliable it is and the power it makes and how smooth it is, I really became obsessed with, even if I couldn't smog this thing, that was the engine I was going to pick. One of the big factors that actually did derail the project was pretty bad, that flushed all of my motivation, was in the middle of trying to mate the Lexus 4-liter V8 and the manual transmission together. They never came as a factory manual, so you have to buy aftermarket components. I put in for a bell housing that was custom made specifically to mate the manual to the auto. That kit took 6 months to make and was shipped in from overseas, and by the time I got it, bolted up to the engine, get it into the car, many months had already passed, only to realize none of it was going to work. I wasn't able to get a refund, the company went bankrupt, and I lost out on a lot of money. It really took all the wind out of my sails, just because now you're in a deficit and you need to basically start over, and it really crushed me. Years going by and time chewing away, the motivation was very low, as a car that does not run as an empty chassis is not a very enthusiastic thing to build. Your daily driver that's the fun new toy is always the thing getting the attention. So the race car just continued to sit. Thankfully, I've got a wonderful pool of friends that came together, both helping install the engine, fabricating parts, finding things, helping wire it at those nights that when you spend 2 a.m. in the morning wiring things with your buddy. Those are the memories that you build with cars like this that are irreplaceable. And that's where this car starts to come in. I got with KW Suspension. I wanted to give the community, who are also very passionate about this platform, a competition level suspension that we can run on our race cars that can compete compared to some of the Chinese knockoffs and other companies that do stuff for drift spec or for just a road type coilover. But I wanted a truly motorsports level competition type suspension that we can get for this platform. After quite a bit of development and time spent in both R&D and test fitting, we finally have an actual competition tier motorsport coilover offered for the AE86. The paint color itself, like the car for many years, was multicolored because its functionality of a running, driving car came far before what it looked like. And it was this multicolor eyesore that people actually came to love. They knew it straight out from looking at it. I could be anywhere and it would be spotted instantly. People knew it was me and my car. It wasn't just some hoopty. So for years it sat that way and started picking through. I wanted a color that was mostly bonkers, but enough that it could still be classy. The car started its life as lime green. I was very tempted to go back to that lime green, but I thought it was just a little too shouty. I still wanted something, and as a kid, I've always been a big fan of purple. The purple just continued to stood out. My wife's like, you should do a purple. It would be perfect for it. And I'm very happy. I paired with another AE86 Fanatic Demo out of here in Fresno as well, and got together and made an amazing paint color that custom mixed by us, and turned out perfect. The car is just amazing looking. The bumper itself was actually something very special. Ended up that I had an original bumper, but it was damaged in a very bad way. KW was putting together a track fest and was featuring this car as it is one of the prototypes for the AE86 suspension. We had an obscene deadline, and like on all TV shows that are all drama, we have this insane deadline that we have to make. But it was a deadline that I genuinely needed to make, and I wanted to have the car looking the part of not just some multicolored hoopty out on track. Got together with Demo, and we had 15 days to go from nothing was done to it needed to be on track, and it was just this obscene crunch to try and get it going. The minute that I dropped it off, he looked at the front bumper and it had a lot of damage, and we both came to the conclusion that the amount of damage was not worth fixing, and we just needed to move on. We put it together and dug through every nook and cranny that we could find in the Corolla community to try and find a front bumper. Ended up that someone happened to have a bumper in their storage that seemed to be fitting and just in the right timeline. Technopro Spirit is a small tuning company out in Japan. They made a handful of these bumpers for their race cars, and an even lesser amount that even got shipped to the United States. To my knowledge, it might be the only one. I haven't been able to confirm it yet, but it is kind of cool that it is a very small number and very few people know what it is. Managed to get it on the car, Frenched the stock turn signals back into it. Demo's custom work made it look amazing. The car itself turned out just better than I could ever imagine. In its current state, it is an absolute blast to drive. It's just turnkey. It's just a car that people can enjoy. Everyone who drives it is just non-stop smiles. The car will have a future in trying to go faster, as we do with all of our cars. But for now, for many years to come, it's just going to be something that I enjoy, brings a smile to my face. It's just a car that to take out on the weekends, both visually and on track, is just an absolute pleasure. So big thank you to all of my friends that have helped with this car. A huge thank you to Hype Racing, Caliber Customs, KW Suspension, but above all else, thank you to my wife, not only for supporting me with this car, but pushing me to get this thing done, and I love her to death for it. Thanks to all those that actually care about this car and care about the stuff that I want to share with the world. I think this car is just a ton of fun and just want everyone to enjoy it, enjoy the car automotive passion. All of us are car nuts for one reason or another. So thanks for watching, thanks for hearing about me and this car.
Alrighty.
Sweet.